wanted to welcome everybody to our Southern Strength meeting. It's a Black Parkinson's Network support group, and it's the very first virtual support group in Alabama, and it was created specifically to support Black individuals and families impacted by Parkinson's disease. So welcome. So we're in for a treat this evening. We have a dynamic speaker that's going to come before us. Let me read his bio, and then we'll get started, and we'll let him come in his own way.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
Oh, I thought you said something.
So tonight we have Thomas Gossum Jr. He's an actor, a writer, a speaker, and communications consultant. A 1975 graduate of Auburn University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Communications. Gossom made history as the first Black athlete to graduate from the university, where he was also a starting wide receiver for the Tigers from 1972 to 1974. His groundbreaking journey is told in his memoir, Walk On, My Reluctant Journey to the Integration at Auburn University. As an actor, Gossum's credits include Fight Club, Jeepers Creepers 2, In the Heat of the Night, and his acclaimed performance as the title character Israel in the Emmy Award winning NYPD Blue episode Lost Israel. An accomplished author, he also wrote the Slice of Life short story collection and co authored Just Follow Me, James Owens, and the integration of Southeastern Conference football. In addition to his writing, he directed and produced Quiet Courage, the James Curtis Owens story, a documentary honoring Auburn's first Black football player. Alongside his wife, Dr. Joyce Gilly Gossam, he owns Best Girls. Oops, lost my place. Best Girl Incorporated, a unique multi-platform communications company dedicated to all forms of effective communication. Both Thom and Joyce are passionate supporters of higher education, libraries, and literacy. He also is the host of the Tuesday with Thom, a weekly hour-long positive talk show that has built a national audience through live streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Each week, the show brings together diverse voices, meaningful conversations, and uplifting perspectives. So that is a little bit about our speaker. And so we're going to allow him to come in and speak in his own way and just welcome him with me, Thom.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate it. It's an honor, and I think I know that I'll enjoy this. Uh, I want to thank you, Michael, for that introduction. I'm sure that I know less about Parkinson's than pretty much everybody that's on the Zoom, but I'll do the best I can. And I can tell you through those experiences that you talked about, whether it was film, television, or what have you, I've learned a lot about life. I've learned a lot about success, failure, picking yourself up and starting again. And I've even learned about sickness and in some cases death. Uh, Listening to that introduction put a big smile on my face. It took me back over years of vivid memories, history, and stories. And I look back on it now, and it's been 7 decades. And sometimes I don't like to admit that, but it's been that long. Some of those memories include fun moments, man. I've had some fun moments like in Auburn where I squared off with Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali came to Auburn's campus to give a talk. And and I was in a journalism class. And so I was right down front. And when he finished, we all kind of rushed out the back so we could catch him as he came out. And Mr. King was the campus photographer. Mr. King came over to me and he said, "If you'll get close to him, I'll get a picture for you." And I said, "Okay." And so when he came out, I started walking towards him, and he went into his routine, "Joe Frazier," and he squared off, and he started throwing punches at me, and I started leaning back, And I still have that photo. It was a great, great moment. He spent the evening with us, and we just had a lot of fun. Um, some of my favorite memories are from the year 2000. Um, 2000 was a tough year for the Gossoms. It was the year my mom left us. Um, my mom was a big, big reader, and I'm a big reader because of my mom. Um, my mom, my mom died from cancer. A memory of her last days includes my dad, who was her caregiver, sitting beside in the chair beside her bed and not sleeping. And finally, I made him go to bed one night, and it was a tough time for us. As I said, my mom was a big reader, and I became a big reader. Comics, bar, Sports Illustrated, you named it, and I read it. And when I turned 9 years old, and I'll never forget this, when I turned 9 years old, my mom took me to the Titusville Library in the city of Birmingham. We walked down to the library, and I went in that library, and I was just fascinated. There were so many books, so many things. You could go around the world and never leave home. And that became my thing. I became a huge reader. Um, um, Mom was there with me, and so it was. I'm very, very grateful for that because that really has spurred me in all the professional things I've done. Reading has been a huge part of it. Um, so I talk about my mom a lot because she was my charm. My mom made me believe that I could do anything I wanted to do. Uh, I remember her telling my dad that that boy can do anything he wants, and that was incentive enough for me because being involved in the things I've been involved in, athletics and television, film, writing, you have to have someone who believes in you. You have to have someone that will go with you all the way. You also have to have a little luck working for you, a sense of where you're going, and a willingness to work. Uh, in my elementary school, Our Lady of Fatima, which was on 6th Avenue, if if you're familiar with Birmingham, 6th Avenue and 14th Street, where the Bartow Arena is right now. That was where my elementary school was. And one day we had a little library in that elementary school. And as I go, you'll see how libraries have become a very critical part of my life. Um, I, I made a discovery in the library that has influenced me for the rest of my life. I discovered a series of books called The Rover Boys. And the Rover Boys were three brothers, Tom, Dick, and Sam, and they had all these adventures. The Rover Boys out west, the Rover Boys in the jungle, the Rover Boys on Treasure Island, the Rover Boys in the ocean, and so on and so forth. These books were written in the early 1900s by a man named Arthur Winfield. And once I read these books and read all the stories about them, so on and so forth, uh, I decided that I wanted to be a Rover Boy. I was going to have all these adventures in my life. First of all, let me say this: I have the hiccups, and so I apologize. So I'm talking around my hiccups here. So forgive me. When I was little, and my uncles and my aunts and my dad had 12 siblings. My mom had six. So we had a lot of cousins. And there were a lot of cousins all over the place all the time. And my aunts and my uncles would always ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I would tell them, I would name all these things. I say, I want to be an actor, I want to be a writer, I want to be a football player, and so forth. And they would all just kind of shake their heads and walk away. Maybe that boy will get it after a while. A few years ago, I had talked so much about the Rover Boys, and it's book. It says it was written for young Americans.
Uh-oh, Tom, I think I accidentally muted you. If you'll just click unmute, you should be
All
good.
right, I did. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Um, anyway, my mother-in-law bought me two copies of the Rover Boys. These books were written in 1909. And as I said, they were very, very influential uh, in my life. Um, I from the year 2000 to 2012, I think it was on an airplane every other week. Whenever I wasn't working, I was flying home. My mom had gotten sick, and the best thing was for me to try to get back and forth. But I was on the plane so much. I flew in from Los Angeles to Memphis to change planes. When I got off the plane in Memphis, I had to get back on the plane and go back to Los Angeles because they had a job for me. Um, I can tell you different stories about that era. I can tell you about a story about Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston. I can tell you the story about O.J. Simpson, who I played with. I can tell you a story of I sitting in the airport one day, and I would get there early. I'd get there and I'd catch that early flight out of L.A. so I could get home about 2 o'clock. And I I saw a pair of feet sitting in front of me, standing in front of me, and I was wondering, I knew somebody was standing over me, but I didn't look up. And so I finally looked up, and it was Little Richard. And then you may remember Richard Penniman. Little Richard was standing there. And the thing about it is when you're in the TV and the film business is you don't know everybody, you don't know who you're supposed to know. And so you'll see some people and you may thought Little Richard didn't know me, but he thought he was supposed to know me. And so he came over and we start talking. He reached in his pocket, he pulled out a photo of himself and he signed it and he gave it to me. So I got a little picture of Little Richard here at the house. I played with O.J. Simpson, and I know about all the stuff that happened. Nicole was there when I was there. I got along with Nicole and O.J. Very well. They invited me to their home, uh, um, and I met Rod Stewart one night. I met Rod Stewart downtown at the Hotel Figueroa. My goddaughter was in town from Birmingham, and another young lady who had graduated from Auburn, who was from Birmingham. They had come to Los Angeles, and I was working on a film called Triple X with Ice Cube and Sam Jackson. And afterwards, we had a big party downtown at the Hotel Figueroa. And I told those two young ladies I would take them to this party because you have a rap party when you wrap the show, and the rap parties are huge, man. And so they met me down there, and so we were walking into the Hotel Figueroa, and Rod Stewart walks out, and I had to impress the young ladies that I knew Rod Stewart, although I didn't. And I said, Rod, what's happening, man? And I went over to him and I hugged him. And he's trying to figure out, okay, who is this guy? And so I got this bear hug on him and he can't get away from me. And we sat there and we had a talk for a while. And finally I said, well, Rod, I'm gonna let you go, man. I gotta get going. I gotta take these ladies in there. And we went inside, and one of the ladies' name was Sarita. And Sarita is a young black girl who had this incredible Southern accent. Just had a Southern accent that was just, I mean, it was syrupy. She could say, hey, and it would just go on and on. And so Sarita had gone to, both of the young ladies had gone to Auburn. And Sarita asked him, we saw Ice Cube, and she says, I see Ice Cube. I want to go over and get a photo with Ice Cube. I said, well, come on, let's go. So we started over there, and this big bodyguard guy, about 7 feet tall, stood and blocked us. And I said, hey man, she just wants to go over and see Ice Cube and get a photo. And he looked at her and he said, well, how you doing? And she said, hey, and it just went on forever. And he said, Cube, you got to come over here, man. And Ice Cube came over. We had a great night. So I've had some experiences and some interaction with people. Worked with Ann Margaret in Nashville. She directed the film. Worked with Magic Johnson. Went to Magic Johnson's office because at one point when Magic Johnson was doing the theaters, we were wanted to get one of his theaters in Birmingham. I was doing a lot of work in Birmingham there with the people who were doing downtown. And so I don't know how, but I got a meeting with Magic and Irvin. He's not Magic to the people who know him. He's Irvin. And I went in and had a good talk with Irvin. Still talk to him today. And that was just one of the different experiences that I had. I'll tell you guys a football story at Auburn. We were playing a game, and our coaches had made a decision that we had at least four offensive guards that could play. You can only play two at a time. And so they decided that they would message the plays in by one of the guards. And so we're out there on the field, we get the ball, we're in the huddle, and we're looking over at the coach, and he's talking to the kid he's going to give the play to, and the kid's just nodding his head, nodding his head, nodding his head. And then he takes off towards us, and we're in the huddle, and we're saying, come on, man, come on, come on, come on. And he's running, and he gets about halfway, and he stops. And he looks back at the coach, and he looks at us. He looks back at the coach, and we say, somebody in the huddle say, oh, hell, man, he forgot to play. And he had forgotten to play just that quick. And that was the last time that they let the guards bring the plays into the huddle. You know, I think about everything I've been involved in, and none of it's been easy, but all of it's had its positive and negative effects on me. It helps to have the support that I had. My parents were great. Over the years between high school and college graduation, like my dad, I always had a job. I worked one summer for the city of Birmingham. I worked on a garbage truck all summer. I worked for U.S. Steel. I drove an ice cream truck, which I loved. That was great. I drove it all over Birmingham and sold ice cream. I sold shoes. And that was my dad's influence, because my dad had a saying, if you don't work, they don't pay you. And my dad went to work regardless. It snowed once in Birmingham, and this was after I was older, and it was really a snow where it shut the whole town down. And my parents' driveway was on a slope, and so knowing that the driveway was on the slope, knowing that my parents couldn't get out, so I called over and I was talking to my mom for a while, and I said, "Well, let me talk to Daddy," and she said, "Well, your daddy gone to work." I said, "Well, how in the world did he get that car out of there?" She said, "He left here at 4 o'clock this morning, walking." That afternoon, we saw a silhouette of a man in the Birmingham newspaper walking along a railroad track on his way to a Sipco. And that was my dad. And that's where my influence came from. That it doesn't matter if it's snow, rain, sleet, what have you. My dad always said, if you don't work, they don't pay you. In 1970, I walked onto the football field at Auburn University. I'd only had 2 years of football experience at John Carroll, where I went to high school, Catholic school. But I was fast, man. I could run 40 yards in 4.4 seconds, and that was fast. So after about 10 months, including play on the freshman team and spring training practice, I was rewarded with a 4-year scholarship. Man, I was lucky. We had a shortage of receivers in the upcoming years, and as I said, I could run the 40 yards in 4.4 seconds, so that made me a valuable commodity. Later, I would make it to the last cut. When I said I worked with O.J. Simpson, I made it to the last cut with the Buffalo Bills as a free agent. And this is how that worked. There were about 100 guys in camp at the start of camp, and they're going to keep about 55 guys. There were 21 receivers in camp, and only 4 would make the team. Well, 2 of them had been starters the previous year. One of them they drafted in the second round. They gave him a lot of money, so he was going to make the team because they had invested money in him. And that left 18 of us for one job. That's how that business works. And so I survived the different cuts as we went, and we got to the last cut the week before the very first game, and I made that cut. And I thought I had made the team. But the next morning, they traded for a veteran player, and I was let go. And that's how that business works. Athletics, acting for television and film, writing, consulting. One day you're on the team, and the next day you may be looking for a job. And you understand that that's how it works. I fell in love with football early on. I not only fell in love with football, I fell in love with Bobby Mitchell. Who is Bobby Mitchell? In 1962, the President of the United States declared to the owner of the Washington team, and they were called Redskins then, and we don't call them that anymore, but at that time, that's what they were called. And the Washington team played in the stadium that was owned by the government. And the Washington team refused to integrate. They were the last team in the NFL to integrate. And so the president threatened the owner that if he didn't integrate, they would have to find somewhere else to play. So the owner went out and he got Bobby Mitchell. Bobby Mitchell became the first Black player to play for the Washington franchise in the NFL. He was an outstanding halfback and wide receiver. That was who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Bobby Mitchell. Why did I want to be Bobby Mitchell? Bobby Mitchell was a great athlete but he was also a community and social leader who wanted to play some positive part in the civil rights movement. After his playing career, Bobby Mitchell played for Washington for at least 10 years. He was a fantastic player. And after his playing career, he became an executive with Washington. He joined their scouting department in 1969. He was later named assistant general manager in 1981. In all, Bobby Mitchell spent 40 years with the Washington franchise. He was the face of the Washington franchise in the Washington community. Everybody knew Bobby Mitchell. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1983, and he had his jersey number 49 retired by the team following his death in 2020. But that's who I wanted to be, and that's why I wore number 49. They gave me number 82, but I told them I wanted number 49. They said, well, nobody wears 49. I said, I want to wear 49 because I wanted to be like Bobby Mitchell. You know, in speaking of integration, that was big when I came along. Maybe you've seen the documentary Breaking the Huddle, the integration of college football. There were several of us who was in. I happened to be one of the guys in it. We shot it in Santa Monica, California, and there was about a dozen of us who were being interviewed. Bubba Smith, Jerry Levias. Jerry Levias was probably the greatest player I've ever seen. Jerry Levias was the first Black player in the Southwest Conference. He was a hell of a player. But it was a difficult time. And when you talk about the integration of sports, it was difficult from the standpoint of Jerry Levias got death threats. And he played at SMU. He was from Texas. And Jerry was told that he was going to be shot on the field. And so he better not score any touchdowns or he'd be killed on the field. Jerry went to his coach and told his coach that he didn't want to play in that game. And he never told him why. And so the coach put him out there anyway, and it was a tough thing for Jerry. You know, when we were doing the interviews, I've never seen so many grown men cry. Jerry Levias cried through his whole interview. And he said, it's been 40 years, and I can't talk about this without crying. And he couldn't talk about it without crying because the integration was a traumatic thing. I mean, we were kids. We were 17, 18 years old. And the first Black guy who played, I can tell you all the first Black guys at all the schools because I knew them all. First Black guy at Florida State was from Miami, and he was a great player. And he went to Florida State, and things weren't quite working out the way he thought they should have. And so, but he didn't want to go home to Miami because he was a stud player, and he had been the top player from the city of Miami, and so on and so forth. So in order to avoid that, he shot himself. And told everybody that he had been robbed and that the robbers shot him. Well, he made a huge mistake. He bled out and he died. The first Black player at the University of Kentucky died in practice. It was a heck of a time to be a first. Being a first wasn't a whole lot of fun in a lot of cases. The biggest cultural change in college football today is the NIL and the transfer portal. But back then, the biggest cultural change was integration of Southern college football. First Southern team to integrate was Maryland. I can tell you the first Black players on most of the Southern college teams. James Owens was at Auburn. John Mitchell and Wilbur Jackson were at Alabama. Ben Williams was at Ole Miss. Horace King was at Georgia. Perry Wallace was the first Black player in the Southeastern Conference. He played basketball at Vanderbilt and ended up being a lawyer for the federal government. About a month ago, we had a ring ceremony for our 1972 team. I'm sorry, I get a little teared up sometimes. And what I realized was when we got up and we introduced ourselves, and we all knew each other, but we got up and said a little short stuff about who we were and so on and so forth. All the guys were from small towns in Alabama, and none of them had ever played with or against any Black players. And that just made it exceptionally hard, not only for us, but on them. Because when I look back and see that all these guys were from little bitty towns, and so they were asked to do something they had never done before, just like we were asked to do something we had never done before. I was the second African-American football player to play at Auburn. And like I said, I walked on. I got a scholarship. And Coach Jordan, our coach was Ralph Shug Jordan. He coached at Auburn for 25 years. Coach Jordan had a close relationship with Governor Wallace. And this was kind of a funny story. When we would fly to away games, we would fly out of Montgomery. And the governor would come, and the governor at the time was Governor Wallace. He would come to the airport and see us off. And so I guess every now and then I was a little bit of a radical. And so the guys would tease me, because the governor would come over and when we would walk out the door, he would shake everybody's hand. And they would all say, "Are you going to shake his hand, Gossom?" And I said, "Of course I'm going to shake his hand. He's the governor." But the governor he must have been in on it or something, because I remember at least twice he would come and sit next to me. And there were only two Black guys on the team. He'd sit next to me. And one time he said to me, "Believe it or not, I'm on your side." Now, I don't know what that meant then, and I still don't know what it means now. But we ended up having good conversations. We had a young Black girl, Love Scales, became the first Black homecoming queen at Auburn. And the governor would come because the governor was chairman of the board or something to that fact. And he had to escort her. And I can tell you from watching this man escort this young lady, I think he was proud to escort her. He was different, much different than he was publicly when he would get up and make his speech or when he was standing in the schoolhouse door. Or anything such as that. He was different when I met him in Montgomery, and he said he was on my side. I don't know what that meant. I was proud to be the first in my family to go to college. Getting a scholarship took the financial burden off of my parents. I started 3 years. I was the leading receiver all 3 years. We had 4 years I played. We had great years. We finished number 9. We finished number 5. We finished number 8. In 1 year we finished 6-6, but we never had a losing season. We played in 4 bowl games. We lost to Oklahoma. We beat Colorado. We lost to Missouri. We beat Texas. things were just moving along and going smoothly. And then, I hit a couple of speed bumps. Uh, More important than our record was what was happening in my hometown. Integration, again, was the biggest cultural change of the 20th century, the integration of Southern college football. In June of 64, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. I'm Catholic. I went to Catholic school, Our Lady of Fatima, and then to John Carroll. And once the president signed the Civil Rights Act, Bishop Tulin, who was the over all the diocese, and the diocese was the entire state of Alabama, Bishop Tulin declared that all the Catholic schools in the state of Alabama would integrate that fall. Now, that was only 2 months away. And schools across the county had to try to figure out if they could change with the times or if they were going to try and hold steady to what I call yesteryear. And I went out for the freshman basketball team at John Carroll. And we had our first game. And we had a great coach, first of all, Coach Richard Porter. Coach Porter died a couple of years ago. And I loved Coach Porter. He was absolutely wonderful. And you could go into his office and sit and talk with him. And so we had our first game. And we were to go into the locker room, and your uniform would be hanging up in front of your locker. And so we went to get our uniforms, and we looked, and I couldn't find my uniform. So I went to Bobby. Bobby was the freshman manager. And I said, Bobby, I can't find my uniform, man. What's up? He said, Thomas, you need to go see Coach. And so I went to see Coach Porter, and I walked into his office and I said, Coach, what's going on? And he said, sit down, Thomas, we need to talk. And I sat down, and Coach told me that I wasn't going to be able to play in the game. Now I'm 14 years old, and I've read a lot about integration. I've heard about a lot of the issues that people were having, but it had never directly affected my life. And Coach Porter said, Thomas, you're not going to be able to play in the game tomorrow. And I said, why, Coach? I did everything you asked me to do, man. He said, Thomas, you didn't do anything. But the other school refuses to play if you play. So it still bugs me. So we talked for a while, and he said, Thomas, these games we are playing now are more important than who wins and who loses. We're changing a way of life in Birmingham. So I said, well, okay, Coach, how about if I just go and I'll sit behind you guys, I'll sit behind the team, and I'll cheer the guys on, because, we were freshmen, but I had gotten really close with some of the guys. And Coach said, Thomas, you don't understand. They don't want you in their gym. Whoo! I said, damn, Coach. And so I didn't go to that game. And we then made it a point, me and John Carroll, to play all the teams who had refused to integrate. We went to one school one night, and, the freshman team plays at 5 o'clock. The varsity doesn't play till about 7. So there's not a whole lot of people in the gym, and when people are shouting or saying things, you can hear it all over the gym. So we went to this one school, and again, I was the only black player on the team, um, and this guy called me every name under the sun: a monkey, a baboon, a coon. He just went on and on and on. And it got so bad that some of my teammates, the white guys, I looked around, they had tears in their eyes. They had never heard anybody talk to a kid that way. And so Coach Porter called timeout. And he said, we ran over to him and he said, what do you want to do, Thomas? I said, what do you mean, coach? He said, I can take you out of the game and that guy quit calling you names, or I can leave you out there. And my job was always to take their best offensive guy and take him out of the game. He said, I can leave you out there and you shut that boy down and don't let him make a bucket. And we'll win this game. Excuse my language. He says, we'll kick their ass and we'll get on the bus and we'll go home. I said, well, leave me out there, coach. And I went back out there and I did. I shut him down. But the end of that story was actually a positive. That young man who I was guarding, when I went to Auburn, he lived 2 doors down from me, and we ended up being friends. And he apologized to me. He said, I am so sorry for the way you were treated that night. I said, but you didn't do anything, man. He said, yeah, but that was so unnecessary. And and then there's one more integration story that probably affected my life more than the others. And a young black athlete in the Midwest somewhere died in practice at one of the schools. It was discovered after his death that he had sickle cell disease, a disease that primarily affects people of color, most common in people of African descent. So there were now 4 of us on the team, and I was the senior at this time. And so I guess the NCAA or whomever put out an edict that everybody had to be tested. All the black players at the different schools needed to be tested. And so we went, and there were now 4 of us: myself, Mitzi, Cedric, and Sullivan. And so I let them go first because I was the senior. I guess I was trying to be a leader or something, whatever. And all of their tests turned out negative. And so it was my turn. My test turned up positive. And the guy, I guess he was like a PA today. He wasn't a physician, but maybe he was a physician's assistant. And he said, oh man, if you got sickle cell, you shouldn't be playing football. And so they tested me 3 more times, and every time it was positive. So Dr. Turk came, and Dr. Turk tested me, and it was positive. So they called the athletic department, talked to Coach Jordan, told him what was happening, told him that I had tested positive. And so I had to go back over to the athletic department. Coach Jordan, when I got to the athletic department, Coach Jordan, and like I said, Coach Jordan had coached for 25 years. He had never coached any black players until his 20th year. But he liked me, and I knew he liked me. That didn't mean he treated me any better than anybody else, but he had called his doctor in Birmingham at the hospital, and they were waiting on me to come to Birmingham. Uh, I drove up to Birmingham by myself, which was dumb, but I didn't want anybody to ride with me because I didn't want to see me crying the whole way. And went to my folks' house. My parents were just shocked. And we went down to University Hospital and they checked me in. That was Tuesday. Our first game of the season was Saturday. And so for the next 2 days, man, they poked and they prodded and they did this and did that. And it was determined finally by Thursday that I did not have sickle cell disease, but I do have the sickle cell trait. And if you have the sickle cell trait and you marry somebody that has a trait and you have a child, it's a good chance that child, 50% chance that child will have the disease. And so they came in that Thursday and told me I was cleared, I could go. And one thing I wanted to hear more than anything is, yeah, you can play football. And so that Friday, my parents came and got me, took me over to Legion Field where we were playing. The team arrived on the bus about the time we got there, and everybody knew what had happened. And that was I walked into the locker room, and the guys gave me a standing ovation. And the next day, Coach Barfield called the first play to me, and we went for 25 yards. We won that game. But that was a scary moment for the Gossoms. So after football, I ended up working for AT&T/Bell South as a young executive. I was put in a position where I could learn a lot about executive behavior. And while I was working as what I call a junior executive, I began work doing community theater at night. And Lady Luck again entered my life. After a show one night over on the south side of Birmingham, I can't think of the name of the theater now, and I got a call from a lady the next morning. She was a casting agent. I never knew what a casting agent was until that moment. She told me that there was a movie director in town, and he had been at the show the night before, and that he was in town to shoot a film, and he wanted to write a part for me in his film. That was my first film project. And that film boosted me. I wasn't planning on going any further than just doing community theater. But I got my SAG card, Screen Actors Guild card, from being in that film. And I started working with Carol O'Connor and In the Heat of the Night. I did 25 episodes of In the Heat of the Night with Carol and Howard. They were wonderful to work with. Carol was great. Carol wrote most of the scripts. He would write them longhand. We'd be working on a show, and he'd be writing the next show. Howard was an incredible actor. Howard was gay, and that was a big deal then. The people in Los Angeles tried to get Carol to get Howard to date women. And so they could shoot photos of him and put them in the magazines, like this was his girlfriend or whatever. They do have Hollywood couples who aren't couples, but they're couples for publicity. And Howard refused to do that. And so they went to Carol because Carol was the executive producer. He was the top guy, and asked Carol to make Howard do that. And Carol refused. And so Howard stayed Howard. And I think we all loved Howard. Anyway, I worked with one of my favorite jobs was working with Luther Vandross. Luther was cool. And we worked in Salt Lake City. And it was on a show called Touched by an Angel. And I was the high school principal. And Luther was the janitor. And so when Luther would be cleaning up after school, he would be singing. And so we had a scene where I would go up to Luther and we would talk about something. And then when I walked off from Luther, I started singing. Well, you know, I'm not the best singer in the world. And so after Luther had been singing, and then I started singing, and everybody started laughing. And I said, y'all ain't supposed to laugh. It's not supposed to be a funny scene. But I loved Luther, and maybe 6-8 months after we shot that, Luther died. And he was just a great, great guy to work with. And I'm grateful for all those experiences. Even, you know, OJ, and I know about the thing with his wife and all that. But OJ was always in my corner on that team. He was a phenomenal athlete. Just, oh man, just to be out there and be playing with him, you find yourself watching him more than anything else. So anyway, I ended up in LA, and I learned the 4 stages of an actor's life. There are 4 stages. Who is Thom Gossom? Get me Thom Gossom. Get me a young Thom Gossom. Now, who is Thom Gossom again? Those are the 4 stages. And I tell you, I don't know if you guys ever watch TCM. I'm a big TCM guy, Turner Classic Movies. One of my favorite actors is Van Heflin. So they have a great story in Hollywood when you get there and they start talking to you about money and stuff and how difficult it is to make money. And when you make money, you make it like my friend Terry. Terry had his own series for 3 shows. He ended up broke because you have to pay the accountant, the lawyer, this, that, the whatever. But there's this great story about Van Heflin. The other thing, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but when actors aren't working, they can go on unemployment because they're independent contractors. So Van Heflin, and this is back, I guess, in maybe the 50s, early 60s, and Van Heflin is in line to go to get unemployment. And it's a long line that day, and it takes forever to get up there. And he finally gets up there, and the guy asked him, he says, so are you looking for work? He said, yeah, I'm looking for work. He said, well, what kind of work are you looking for? He said, I'm an actor. I'm looking for acting work. He says, now, how do you go about finding work as an actor? He said, well, I have an agent, and my agent gets work for me. He said, wait a minute. So your agent gets work for you? And he said, yes. He said, so let me ask you this question. If I call your agent up, will he verify the fact that he gets work for you? He said, yeah, but you ain't got to call him. Hell, he's in line. He'll be up here in a few minutes. It's one of my favorite stories. Oh, man. So I'm going to kind of move along here. I watched a film with Ryan Reynolds, an actor, talking about Parkinson's. He talked about people living with Parkinson's. And he met with, it was a guy, Dr. Brillman, two people living with Parkinson's, and a care partner and advocate. And they shared their perspectives on navigating Parsons related hallucinations and delusions, from what makes these symptoms hard to talk about to what helped them move the conversation forward. I read an interesting piece on Carly Simon, who recently told the world that she has Parkinson's. She says she has purposely remained out of the public eye in recent years as she learned to live with the disorder. She says there is no tidy or predictable schedule to the illness. She said, I have not stopped living and I have not stopped working. So my mom, I mentioned my mom in the beginning. My mom left us in the year 2000. It was too late when we found out that mom was keeping a secret from us and she was trying to self-medicate herself. And by the time she got the attention that she needed, she was already stage 4. I think that we all have the opportunity to write the film of our lives. And I'm not talking about actually sitting down and writing. I'm talking about my mom had written a sad ending to the film of her life. And let me just conclude by talking about filmmaking. A film is made up of 3 acts and a closing. And the acts and the closing oftentimes can mirror our lives. I've often said that we get to write the film of our lives. And again, I'm not talking about sitting down and actually writing a script. I'm talking about our lives unfold daily, and we're scripting it. It can unfold like a script. Your script mirrors your life. If you think about the movies you've seen, Act 1 is always the shortest act in the film. It sets up the story. Generally, this occurs in life from birth to late teens. That's the first act. And what happens, something happens, and what happens is you're born. Act 2, life hits us. The second act, a difficulty happens. Late teen years to early adulthood. Perhaps there's some conflict that enters your life. Perhaps some occurrence you have no control over. There is a problem that is very difficult to solve. Our protagonist is in trouble. In Act 3, there's the search for a solution. In the third act, answers to the issues start to show themselves. Think of a film. The lovers are trying to get back together, or the thief is trying to figure out how to get away with the money, or you're the patient or the caregiver for someone with Parkinson's. The fourth act is the conclusion, where the problem is hopefully solved. And we then have to ask ourselves, and I always ask the audience is this, will you write yourself a happy ending? Whether we write or live ourselves a happy ending, in many cases depends on us, the people around us, and in some cases, some luck. So I am happy to answer questions. I want to thank you all, first of all, for allowing me this time to visit with you. I've enjoyed it. There's a couple things I will leave you with. One is from my dad. I always talk about my mom, but my dad was a heck of a guy. And one of the times in high school, we got a new football coach, and for some reason, he didn't care for me. And I hardly ever talked to my dad about football, so to speak, because my dad was more interested in us getting an education than he was in us, than my playing football. And I went to my dad and I told him that this guy wasn't treating me right, and that it just, I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't talk back to him or what have you. And I'm expecting some sympathy from my dad. And my dad told me, he said, son, you're just passing through. And I said, what are you talking about, Dad? He said, you're just passing through there, man. That man's where he's going to be the rest of his life. You're on your way somewhere. You can put up with a little stuff. He didn't say stuff. You can put up with a little stuff to get to where you want to go. I've always kept that with me. You're just passing through. Couple of other things. Even on the darkest days of our lives, we can still stand tall and we can find the sunlight. When I worked at Bell South, we had a saying. Mr. Jacks, who was the president, had this saying. We had this photo of this snow scene in the forest where you could see no sign of life except for one eagle standing on a branch. And we had this saying in our company that storms bring out the eagles, but all the little birds take cover. Sometimes you never know the true value of a moment until it becomes a memory. So I want to thank you guys for letting me be here. Like I said, I am definitely not a Parkinson's expert, but I've learned a little bit here in the last 3-4 weeks. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody may have.
And we wanted to
Hello,
thank you
Miss.
for your time and for all the nuggets of wisdom that you gave us. It was just incredible the stories that you have to tell and how they're still relevant on today. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule.
Well, I enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys having me in, and it's kind of good to look back on some of that stuff. Some of it some of it still gets me, but it is what it is. So we'll move on.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to say hello. My wife and I, my name is Bill Singleton, and my wife is Nicole Singleton, and we met you at New City Church when you were here.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
just want to say thanks for coming and join our group,
I
and we
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's Birmingham's my hometown. I don't I lived in Los Angeles for a while, but I'm proud to be from Birmingham. I have a good friend of mine who was in the business, and he's from Montgomery, and we hung out a lot in L.A. Um, and he always got a kick out of me because wherever we went, I would engage people in conversations. And one of the first things that would come out of my mouth is, I'm from Alabama. And I shake their hands because people were fascinated to hear and know more about Alabama. And when they came to Birmingham, they were always complimentary of their visit and their time there. And so I became this unofficial ambassador. But when I see him now, he's okay. I know you from Alabama, right? I said, yeah. So, oh,
Since
well,
I have you here,
yes, sir.
no, I'm saying since I have you here, I want to get your opinion on NIL.
You know, I don't know it. I don't know as much as I probably should know about it. And what I will tell you is, we got $15 a month in addition to our scholarships. Um, I think it has caused a lot of confusion. What I found, this is just some hearsay that I've stumbled upon, but at Auburn, because we have a new coach coming in, he's decided for this early practice, two things I think he's doing that I like. One, next Saturday, they're inviting all the alumni athletes, football players, to practice because he's trying to build this thing that we had where we were together. Now you might have 10 new guys on the team you've never heard of before. He's done that, and he's also taken the players away from campus just for this pre-practice, and they are all living in a hotel. And so I think there are some things that coaches are going to have to do to take advantage of the NIL. I mean, I think you can complain about it and so on and so forth, but it's here and it's probably here to stay. And I know this now, and I've said this. If I'm on a team and I'm playing right tackle and I'm just getting a scholarship and the left tackle is getting $500,000, I think you're going to have a problem on that team. And I do think the first year they had it, that Auburn did have some problems on that team. You could see it happening because some of the guys weren't giving up their all. So that's my take on NIL.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anybody else? Okay.
I wanted to mention something really quickly too. I'm actually a retired librarian from the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and I just was really impressed by your story that you told about your mom and how she encouraged you and the whole librarian part of you. So I just wanted to mention that.
You just wanted to what? I didn't hear the last part.
I wanted to mention that to you. I'm
Okay.
a retired librarian, 27 years.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't quite. Did you ask a question or you just made a statement?
No, I was just making a statement.
Okay. Yeah, my mom was great, man. And she took me into the library. Whenever I'm in Birmingham, I always go by that Tennisville Library because it's just our church was right up the street, Our Lady of Fatima, and it was I love books. I wish I could. My mother-in-law found, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but she found this. This is a Rover Boy book, and she found me a couple. This book was written to Percy J. Powell from Farmington, Michigan, on December the 25th, 1910. And I don't know where she found them, but she found them, and I did. I fell in love with these Rover Boys, and they were guys who went to private schools. They were white guys and so on and so forth. But I never thought that I could not be a Rover Boy. I knew I could be a Rover Boy. And that's kind of where I set my sights. So having that kind of fun.
Hi, my name is Denise Coley, and this is my husband, Bernard. We really enjoyed your talk. I really love the ending where you're talking about making a story because Michael and Bernard and I are part of a group that have done a documentary with 12 African Americans who are either care partners or patients. And that's the story by video, but I like your setting up. Start with beginning, 1, 2, 3, and then have a happy ending. So live your life the way you want to be remembered is what I remember out of that. So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a big believer that we write our own happy ending.
So, Mr. Gossom, also, I dropped it in the chat. The minute you mentioned Bobby Mitchell, I lit up.
Did you?
Born and raised in I lived in DC all my life. My dad used to bring Bobby Mitchell to the father and son banquets at his lodge
Man.
every year. So I got to know Bobby as a kid, knowing him. And by the way, I did a quick look up. You're the same age as my wife. I'm a year older than you all. So as you rattled off all those names, it was like, oh my God, I know about all these people. Because we're a family of a lot of firsts. My paternal side is from Southwest Georgia, Albany, Georgia. And so, as you were describing those stories, I've heard them. I heard them. I know a lot of first in not necessarily athletics, but in a lot of other areas. And I've been the first in a lot of those areas. So I can relate to what you were talking about, the feeling, and how sometimes you're off in the corner and you just cry a little.
Yeah.
You think about where we are and what we had to go through to get here. And I never forget, by the way, and try to remind the youth of today the dues that was paid for them to be where they are today. And the challenges. So number one, I applaud the things you did, what you did with your life. And I'm now going to take a look at some of the works that you've done, because I hadn't realized you had, written some of it, but I have to go look, because I'm always wanting to tell our young folks that, we are a talented, artistic, smart ass people. The only reason you didn't know that is because nobody told you. So I'm here to tell you. So I'm going to add those. And I've got a lot of those kind of books on my shelf. So number one, I applaud you in the fact that you're out telling the stories and taking these opportunities. And then I'll throw one more thing in. My wife mentioned we're in several books and documentaries that we've been a part of. I want to have you also share with people why it's important for the lion to write its own story. I have a phrase: the lion will never win the safari until the lion learns how to write, and why it's so important for us to tell these stories ourselves. Okay? Because I don't expect the conqueror to tell my story, And so we have to tell our story. And we have to provide some insights, because it's not necessarily the kids' fault that they don't understand the sacrifices. It's ours. It's our job to tell them. And so I applaud what you've done and the importance of this, and the importance of getting our little insights into these things.
Well, I would tell you, when I wrote my book, My Reluctant Journey to Integration at Auburn University, I wrote it in 2000. It was published in 2007 by Borders Books. 6 months later, Borders went out of business. I said, well, I hope I didn't affect that. That wasn't because of me. But I couldn't find anybody to write it. I would go to the stores and I would look for books about Auburn, and I'd look to see who'd written them, and then I'd call them, but nobody was interested in writing it. And so I wrote it. And I had started making notes when I was in school, because I knew what we were living through was historical. And so I wrote the book, and then everybody really took to it. And I subsequently wrote another book about James. James was first.
Yeah.
And it came out a year ago. And if you get a chance to see it, it's called Just Follow Me. And James was first. And so everybody that has come since then is on James's lineage. And we were very aware of where we were and what we were doing. As James always said, the first time he came out the tunnel, and you guys probably won't know this, but Auburn had to figure some things out. And when the black folks couldn't sit in the stands,
right?
Everybody else, the black folks sat in some special bleachers down in the corner of the end zone. And James said the first time he came out the tunnel and he looked at those people and he said they looked at him, and he realized at that time that he was their football player, that now they had a football player that they could get behind,
right,
that was theirs. And you start thinking about this. And James also told me this. He said that, first of all, it was like being dropped behind enemy lines. And secondly, he said, we were, because, Bo Jackson and Charleston came 10 years later. There wasn't going to be a Bo Jackson when we were there.
Right.
And James always said that, we were brought in to get the fans used to seeing black guys out on the field. And so James and I were it. I'll never forget the first game we played was over in Jackson, Mississippi. And that night, it was at night, and the guy introduced us and how proud we were to be introduced as starters for Auburn University. It was the first time Coach Jordan had some black guys to start for him. And I used to give Coach Jordan hell, but he enjoyed it. I told him one time, I said, Coach, you know something? Me and you brought in integration together at Auburn University. He looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
But I was proud to have played for Coach Jordan, and he did me right. Like I said, it was 10 months, man, and they came over there with that scholarship, and that changed my whole life. So I thank him for that.
Well, I thank you because you did something with that opportunity, know? And your parents must have been something special, because there are other people whose stuff drops in their lap and they fumble the ball.
Yeah.
You did something. So, and I know that comes from your stock,
Yeah. Yeah, they were great. My dad always had two jobs. And I mean, I know he would work and get off. He worked at a Sitco. And I'll tell you a quick story about my dad. He worked at a Sitco for 35 years. And he worked outside. Sitco makes pipes and ship them all over the world. And they load the pipes onto train cars there in the yard. And so Daddy worked outside. When the pipes got loaded onto the train cars, they would have to brace them so that they wouldn't come off, fall off, and so on and so forth. And Daddy said that one day his supervisor came to him and told him that the superintendent wanted to see him in his office. Daddy was trying to figure out what the hell he had done, because he had never been to the superintendent's office. And so what was going on? So he followed the supervisor back through the plant, whatever, and they went up to the superintendent's office. And he said the superintendent was sitting there reading the newspaper. And the superintendent asked him, he pointed to an article, and it was an article by Bill Lumpkin, who was a writer for the Birmingham Post-Herald. And Bill Lumpkin had written an article about me, getting a scholarship at Auburn and walking on and all that. And the superintendent asked my daddy, "Is this your son?" And Daddy said, well, I didn't know whether to say yes or no, because, I didn't want to be, you can be up at it if your son wanted to go to college or whatever. And Daddy said, he told him, said, yes, that's my son. And Daddy said he hadn't even seen the article. He didn't know what he was talking about. And the superintendent congratulated him and shook his hand. And Daddy said from that point forward, he was like a celebrity around the plant. But yeah, my dad was cool. And we would go. He loved when I played football, but he was big on education.
Yep.
Wanted us to get. He figured that was the ticket to get ahead. So, okay, anybody else? Well, I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to do this. I wish you well. If I can do anything else, please let me know. And I'm in and out of Birmingham a good little bit. And I thank you.
Likewise, and thank you so much.
Okay.
And I'll tell George that I saw you.
Okay.
All right.
You can tell him don't have anything smart to say.
Okay, I sure will.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks, Michael.